Top 30 single-player games to look forward to. For all the talk of single-player games dying, there has been a dearth in single-player focused games lately. This year at E3, we got to see plenty of those games in action for ourselves, including a few new ones. Now that some of these games have been revealed, and we have more info on some others, we figured now is the perfect time to present our list of the top 30 upcoming single-player games to keep an eye on. God of War. After 3 numbered games and countless spin-offs, the franchise is getting a soft reboot. A new camera angle, a focus on Norse mythology, and of course Kratos has a son accompanying in his adventures now. Sony Santa Monica is really radicalizing the series by putting a bigger increase on narrative this time around, taking a leaf from Naughty Dog's The Last of Us playbook. Dedicated fans of the series might not be happy about these changes, but if it tells a great story, who cares if it's not exactly the same? Death Stranding. Hideo Kojima showed off his new game at Sony's press conference. It's impossible to say what this naked Norman Reedus simulator will be just yet though. If Kojima's past work is anything to go by, this one is going to be a narrative-focused single-player game every step of the way. We know there will be some action elements, so that's something. With how creepy and weird the trailer was, as well as the return of Norman Reedus as the protagonist, it's safe to assume this will be more or less Kojima's version of Silent Hills. The Last Guardian. For years, everyone thought The Last Guardian was secretly cancelled, but this beautiful looking action platformer with a giant bird dog will finally be in our hands soon. Much like the other games on this list, The Last Guardians looks to be a narrative heavy game, though we know surprisingly little about it. That's for the best though. A lot of the fun of this one will be discovering the story and gameplay for ourselves. Final Fantasy XV. Square Enix is pulling out all the stops for this one, previously stating the game needs to sell 10 million copies for Square to turn a profit. You know with a budget like that, this game has to be good, or it could be the biggest failure of all time. Still, this year and next look to be strong outings for the old school single-player JRPG, and Final Fantasy XV is leading that charge with fantastic visuals and revamped combat. Horizon Zero Dawn. One of the most interesting upcoming games is Horizon Zero Dawn. Developed by Killzone creators Guerrilla Games, Horizon is giving the post-apocalypse a different spin. Instead of zombies and a destroyed world, there will instead be robot dinosaurs and a lush, living, breathing world. The gameplay looks like a blend of action, platforming, stealth and RPG elements, with even a few dialogue choices if the latest demo is anything to go by. It remains to be seen how good the story will be, but so far Horizon is shaping up to be a great game. Detroit: Become Human. Detroit: Become Human looks like it could be a watershed moment for Cage and his studio Quantic Dream. At Sony's E3 press conference, there was no talk of grand ambitions or emotions, just pure gameplay. And it was great gameplay indeed, showcasing a series of choices and their consequences, as well as some intriguing tweaks to Cage's usual gameplay style in the form of detective investigations. This is also a return to Cage having multiple protagonists, telling the story from multiple perspectives. Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 7 looks to totally change the franchise without being a full reboot. Capcom released a demo on PS4 that feels very much like PT. Yes, but it's the scariest thing bearing the Resident Evil name in years. They seem to be taking a different direction with the franchise this time too, cutting the ridiculous story and action and replacing it with slow, creepy spooks that work best in a horror game. Days Gone. I'll be honest, it can be hard to get excited when you hear that yet another open-world zombie survival game is in the works, but Days Gone has a few key distinctions from the rest. It's being published by Sony for one thing, meaning it's got money and talent behind it. That we can see by the sheer hordes of zombies that swarm the player in the game's E3 demo. That's the kind of zombie apocalypse we've never seen before in game form. Insomniac's Spider-Man. Spider-Man hasn't always had the smoothest ride when it came to video game adaptations, but if anyone can handle the web slinger, it's Insomniac Games. Known for Ratchet & Clank and Sunset Overdrive, Insomniac has proven they can handle these big open world, fast-paced, fluid movement systems you'd need in a game about Marvel's poster child. Best of all, Marvel has stated this isn't a cash grab. It's not a movie tie-in game, and they're not rushing it out to meet the release of Spider-Man Homecoming. So, if anyone can nail the feel of fast web-slinging movement, it should be Insomniac. Gears of War 4. Like many games on this list, Gears of War 4 is more of a soft reboot than a true sequel, though it is that as well. Series protagonist Marcus Phoenix is now a father, and you play his son years after the events of the third game. If you're a fan of the Xbox and don't like Halo's focus on multiplayer antics, or Gears' previously meh story, then this is one for you. Scalebound. Hey look, an upcoming Xbox game that isn't Gears of War or Halo. It must be Christmas. Scalebound is a dragon fighting and riding action game from the hallowed halls of Platinum Games. But don't be fooled. At first glance, this doesn't appear to be Platinum's usual shtick. The combat is slower and more methodical, and you have to accurately place your arrow shots to take down these massive beasts. You get to ride dragons as well to defeat these giant monsters. So imagine a cross between Shadow of the Colossus and Panzer Dragoon, brought to you by the people who made Vanquish, complete with cheesy music and writing. Assassin's Creed Empire. The first game on this list we don't know anything about. The most important thing to understand, and possibly even the most exciting, is that Ubisoft is finally taking a break from Assassin's Creed, however temporary. They've been releasing AC games every year since the second, but not this year. Instead, they're going to use the time to completely revolutionize Assassin's Creed. The first big step is, allegedly, setting Empire in ancient Egypt, and might incorporate biblical elements if some leaks are to be believed. Dead Rising 4. Dead Rising has always been a great game to pick up and play, brainlessly mowing down equally brainless living dead. Things took a sour turn in Dead Rising 3 when it was stated that the developers were literally changing the game to be more like Call of Duty. But the fourth installment seems to be taking the series back to its wacky, wonderful roots. Much like Days Gone, there are an insane amount of zombies on screen at any given time, and the tools at your disposal to take them down seems to be at an all-time high for the series. It's good to have you back, Frank. Watch Dogs 2. Gone is boring protagonist Aiden, and in comes Marcus Holloway, who seems to genuinely enjoy what he's doing in this new Watch Dogs game. Throw in the new stomping grounds of San Francisco, an interesting set of characters, and improved gameplay, and you have everything a sequel should be and more. There are going to be some multiplayer elements in this one, but they're subtle, almost like an MMO. You can run into other players doing their own side quests and stuff and just ignore them if you want, or turn off online mode entirely to be truly by yourself. For Honor. For Honor looks to be like a blend of Dark Souls, thoughtful dueling, and Dynasty Warriors hack and slash hordes of enemies approach. While that not might sound too spectacular on its own, it's actually pretty unique once you see it in action. It takes just enough from those two while providing its own local flavour to make it really stand out from others like it. If you want to scratch either of those itches with a new game, or get into one of those games with a nice entry-level kind of game, look no further. Mass Effect Andromeda. Mass Effect has always had a large fanbase, and for good reason. It's a classic space opera that geared specifically towards role-playing and single-player action. Now the franchise is getting a soft reboot like everyone else, bringing in new player characters and a new setting. You now play as Ryder, someone BioWare described as a fish out of water, coming to terms with a new world, and having to become either a hero or a villain, and eventually a legend. It's all pretty vague, so we'll have to see exactly what they mean by this. Respawn and Visceral's Star Wars games. If I can only say we don't know much about these games one more time on this list, this is the time to fire that shot. All we know about these two games set in a galaxy far, far away is what we learned from EA's E3 press conference. Visceral's Star Wars game got a few seconds of beautiful looking footage, bringing to mind the cancelled 1313 from a few years back. It's also the game being written by former Uncharted writer Amy Hennig. Respawn's Star Wars game on the other hand is a total mystery at this point though. Prey. Prey has a strong cult following, and demand for a new game has been going rapidly over the last few years, thanks to Bethesda constantly teasing. But finally we got our first glimpse at Prey 2. The first big surprise is that it's not Prey 2, in fact it's a reboot. I wasn't kidding when I said everyone is doing this now. Set in some kind of space station, you play as a dude whose eye is turning red. It's not much to go on, but it's been revealed that this is the game legendary writer and designer Chris Avellone left Obsidian Entertainment to create. His last few games in particular, Fallout New Vegas, Wasteland 2 and Pillars of Eternity, have been stunning. So whatever he's got up his sleeve in this space horror epic will likely be just that. Epic. Dishonored 2. We've known for a while that Arcane Studios was working on a sequel to Dishonored, but at E3 2016, we finally got to see it in action. You could play as Corvo from the previous game, or Emily, and they both have their own unique set of powers. They're both being voiced, as the story will be taking a bigger role in the sequel. It takes place 15 years after the events of Dishonored, and will partially take place in a new location, Karnaca, a bright and vibrant coastal city. There's even a uniquely presented time travel mechanic, which you can use to solve puzzles and sneak around enemies. Mafia 3. While not a reboot, Mafia 3 is seeing a massive overhaul as well. Gone are the days of the 1930s New York Italian gangster. Instead, you play an African-American Vietnam veteran, Lincoln Clay, returning to a city heavily inspired by New Orleans. When he returns home, he joins a gang, but the gang is almost completely wiped out by the Italian mafia in the city. Clay survives and decides to start his own gang to take revenge. Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. Human Revolution was a great game, but it wasn't perfect either. Developer Eidos Montreal has taken aboard criticism of Human Revolution. They're revamping the gameplay to make stealth and non-lethal playthroughs more viable, and this time around the dialogue choices won't be so hollow. It's always great to see a developer take on criticism and build their next game around that, and with a few changes, Mankind Divided can be a truly memorable single-player experience. Agents of Mayhem. Agents of Mayhem is Saints Row. It's being designed by the same developers, Volition, and has a very similar feel. Volition have promised this new game will have the same silly humour we've come to know from Saints Row, but this time it'll be more grounded in reality and not so random. You'll have a squad of 3 characters to switch between on the fly, and there's a big emphasis on verticality. Each character will have their own superpowers as well, adding an extra layer to the gunplay. No Man's Sky. Everyone knows about No Man's Sky at this point. This space exploration alien planet travel simulation has been in development for years. There will be some online gameplay with this one, like the ability to explore alien planets and mark them on a large overall map, but it can be played with all that stuff turned off. The game is gorgeous and features some really unique gameplay. You're in a ship that can go anywhere, and you have to travel to hundreds if not thousands of randomly generated planets. Most of them will be completely desolate, so when you come across one that does have life, it'll be an exhilarating experience. Recore. Recore is that other game Keiji Inafune is working on. While Mighty No. 9 has had heat over the last few years, people have actually been really interested in what he's got in store with this one. Recore is an action platformer starring a woman and her dog in a big open desert. There seems to be a plot involving a post-apocalypse involving robots, including one you meet early on in the game that requires some kind of power core. Mighty No. 9 might turn out to be a disaster, but Recore looks anything but. Cyberpunk 2077. With the Witcher series drawing to a close, developer CD Projekt Red is ready to start something new. That's where Cyberpunk 2077 comes in. It sounds a lot like Deus Ex, set in a cyberpunk world in the future. There will doubtlessly be robots everywhere, as well as CDPR's typical great writing, characters, and a beautiful open world. Details are scarce, but the setting and the developers behind it are more than enough to make this one interesting. Only problem is, we're likely not going to be seeing it until 2018 reportedly, which feels a lot like 2077. Shenmue 3. Shenmue 3 was bizarrely absent from E3 this year, which is a shame. It's still early in development, but it's been a year after the triumphant return of the franchise at E3 2015, and we haven't seen nor heard a peep from it. Still, it has the potential to be something special. It's the first time we saw a Kickstarter campaign be featured at E3, and it's got all the big players from the previous games returning this time around. It'll be nice to finally see this trilogy come to a close, and hopefully it'll spawn more games like it, which is still something that hasn't really happened yet. Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy VII is generally regarded to be the best in the franchise, though some will disagree of course, and it's finally getting an impressive looking remake. This will mark the first time the biggest game in the franchise is getting HD graphics, full voice acting, and the modern Final Fantasy treatment. Even some of Square Enix's questionable decisions with the franchise as of late can't screw this up, because FF7 was just such a great game with an impactful story, immersive world, and exciting combat. Kingdom Hearts 3. Another game conspicuously absent from E3 this year has been Kingdom Hearts 3. First announced back in 2013, this will be the first main game in the franchise since 2005 saw the release of Kingdom Hearts 2. That's a shame, because many haven't played a Kingdom Hearts game since the second, and they've been waiting a very long time. There isn't much known about it at this time, though a few new worlds have been announced, like Big Hero 6, Tangle, and of course Frozen. Don't be surprised if we run into Iron Man or Luke Skywalker either. This is the big one. We've waited for the next console Zelda since Skyward Sword in 2011, and we are finally just a year away. Our dream of a fully open world Zelda will finally be realised. Nintendo has been coy with footage of the title, but that hasn't lowered our level of excitement at all. Crackdown 3. Crackdown 3 is finally happening, releasing in 2017. It's been 6 years since Crackdown 2, and the series never had a strong following anyway. Multiplayer will play a big part in this game, but who cares, because you can play it in single player as well. Crackdown 3 is a sandbox game where you can blow stuff up, and most of the city will be fully destructible. That's the claim anyway. Does anything else really matter after hearing that? A lot like Just Cause 2 and 3, the story doesn't really matter, as you'll be too busy blowing stuff up in the most elaborate and funny ways possible.
Like this video? Why not give us a like and subscribe? We try and upload amazing videos almost every single day. Thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you on the next one.